You're listening to the Convene Connections podcast with your host, Matthew Currin.
And good evening, everybody. I appreciate you joining me on this Memorial Day. And, this it's kind of a special occasion to me, and I appreciate you being here. Tonight, we're going to kind of flip the switch around, and I have a guest on, and it's Shayna. And so Shayna is coming on, and I'm going to have her interview me, actually, instead of me doing the interview like we're normally used to. So Shayna, how are you doing tonight?
Hey, Matthew, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. And Shayna has a little bit of rain in her area, so there's a little bit of a delay, which we'll deal with as we go through it. But listen, Shayna, just tell everybody a little bit about yourself before we get going tonight.
Sure. So, hi, everyone. My name is Shayna Marie Affle. I am a Christian motivational speaker, if you will. I host online videos through YouTube where I do weekly videos that are motivational, inspirational, creative. Sometimes I may even throw in a little surprise and do a music video. So that's just the gist of who I am, but I am constantly evolving and developing. So that is sure to grow and develop and change. So yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you. We've become good friends here recently. I just interviewed you on the Christians Unite event that we had. It was incredible. So I totally appreciate you with that. And I just thought it'd be a good idea. I love your personality. I love who you are. And I thought it'd be a great idea if you would come on tonight and just interview me, because Memorial Day is kind of a special holiday for us. We talked a little bit about Memorial Day before we came on live, and Memorial Day is one of those things that it's a holiday, but for guys like me who are in the military, it is really something where we kind of reflect and we think about, what we've gone through in the past. So I'm going to turn it over to you. You're in charge, and I'm just going to answer your questions as we go through. And I want to say before I do turn it over to you, we will open it up for phone calls midway through. So if you do have a phone call and you'd like to call into the show, for example, like one guy on right now, Don Collins, hope he calls in a little bit later because he was with me this particular night. So, so about midway through, that would be something, incredible to hear from him. So all right, you're in charge. Let's go. All right. So everyone, we are doing this in observance of Memorial Day. And I know that before we came on, I said Happy Memorial Day without really thinking about what Memorial Day was and what it means to, military professionals. So tell us a little bit about your experience in the military before we really talk about what Memorial Day means and kind of educate people on that. So tell us a little bit about your experience in the military and what you did.
Yeah, so I came in the military in 1994 is when I entered the military, and I was in the Marine Corps. So I went through the basic school, which is where all officers go through up in Quantico, Virginia. And then I left right after that, just had my 25th wedding anniversary. Me and my wife got married after the basic school, and then we transitioned down to Pensacola, Florida, where I was a flight school student. And I flew down there for 2 years before I got my wings of gold as a naval aviator, and I became a helicopter pilot. So we moved back up to North Carolina at the time, and I was assigned to a squadron called HMM 365. And so we'll talk more about HMM 365 a little bit later, but I flew originally the CH-46 Echo. You see the picture back there on the wall and the model there on the stand. That's what I flew. And basically my job was to troop transport. We called ourselves assault support. And so, but what we did is we carried troops, or we carried, resupply in to people. And so that was our job, to go into combat or go into, wherever we were at, and carry Marines in and out. And it was just the best. It was the greatest job. I ended up moving on from there. I went back down to Pensacola, and I was a flight school instructor in the TH-57. So I taught young new flight students how to fly helicopters. And then after that, I went back up and I flew you can't really see it because of the glare, but I flew the V-22 Osprey. And then At 14 years, unfortunately, I was medically retired. And so anyway, I got a full retirement and got out on January 1st of 2007. Became a civilian. I continued to work in the V-22 program as creating training, and then moved on from there. I flew air medical for 5 years, 8 months, did 659 patient flights, something I'm really proud of. And now I am the helicopter pilot for the Penske NASCAR and Indy team. So there we go. That's who I am. And that's kind of what brings me to today.
So when you went into the military, I'm not really sure how that process works, but were you kind of allowed to pick what area you wanted to go into? Like, did you know you wanted to go into the military and then become a pilot, or was that just something that was assigned to you?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I wanted to be a pilot ever since I was a kid in middle school, and probably even before middle school. It was something that I used to talk about, you know, when I was really young, about wanting to be a pilot. It was always my dream. I just had no idea how to become a military pilot. I truly thought, you know, this is during Top Gun, when Top Gun first came out. I truly thought you had two options to be in the military. I thought you could be in the Navy or the Air Force. I had no idea that the Marines even had aviation. I played baseball in college, and I was trying to do Air Force ROTC. But to do that, I went to UNC Greensboro to take Air Force ROTC. I would have to go over to North Carolina A&T. And it was impossible to do both at the same time. So I just happened to be walking through the cafeteria area. And when I was walking through, there was Marines in there. And they had a little table set up with videos playing. And I sat there and talked. And the Marine Corps, you know, if anybody's wondering, the Marine Corps has, you know, one of the best kept secrets. You can get a guaranteed flight contract. So where you sign on the dotted line, you know you're going to flight school unless you mess it up. And so I was able to get a guaranteed flight contract. I went through officer candidate school, and then after completed, got commissioned as an officer when I graduated from college. And then after that, I went on to flight school. And so, yeah, it's the greatest kept secret. So if you're out there, if you got somebody who wants to be an aviator in the military, Marine Corps, that's the only way to go.
I'm sure every line or every different branch says that about their specific branch, like, oh, come to the Navy or come to, you know, the Army. So that's really interesting. Now, as far as when you were a kid, you say you always knew that you wanted to be a pilot. Why piloting? What drew you to wanting to fly?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, if you go back, and I went through this thing where, you know, I did, this is crazy, but I went to this picnic thing, and they had like a little personality test that they were doing at this picnic thing. And I took it, and it said I was going to be a pilot. And so I just, like, from that point on, I really just, I had it in my mind that I wanted to be a pilot. Also, you know, I would be lying if I wasn't, you know, telling the truth that was during the time of Top Gun, right? Everybody our age and my age group watched Top Gun. And so if you didn't want to be a pilot, you know, I think everybody in that time frame really kind of wanted to, you know, fly F-14s like Maverick and, you know, do their thing. So, yeah, so it's just always my dream, right? So, yeah, so that's what I did. And, you know, ended up being right in the Marine Corps. So.
Nice. So I know a little bit about your story, and I think, you know, you have such an amazing and in-depth story. So tell us a little bit about what Memorial Day means to you and what people should take from Memorial Day. How do we as citizens observe Memorial Day?
Yeah, I think there's a big misconception out there because it's a holiday, right? And we talked about this a little bit before. It's a holiday. And so anytime that you have a holiday in America, it's a happy event. Well, for those that wore the uniform, it's not such a happy event, because I would say really the majority of us, especially now that were part of active duty, we've all seen combat. I mean, I hardly know too many people that were in the military that have not seen combat. And I really don't know too many people who have not experienced loss of a friend or a peer or somebody that they served with. So a lot of times people say, you know, happy Memorial Day. Well, you know what? Memorial Day is probably the one holiday that it's not very happy. If you're somebody like us, it's really a time of reflection, and we really reflect on, and we're going to get into talking about my story and some of the people that I've lost while I was in the military. But it's one of those things where, I was in combat. I went to Afghanistan. There was some pictures that came up a little bit earlier. I was in Afghanistan in 2001, right at the beginning of it. I deployed on ships. I was in Operation Allied Force in Kosovo. In Afghanistan, we lost multiple helicopters. We lost one helicopter that was attached to us where we lost Marines, So it's one of those things where you're experiencing loss, you're in combat, and combat sometimes is glamorized, right? Top Gun or any of the war movies. Well, guess what? When you're in combat, it's not very glamorous. It's high stress, high stakes. Your life is on the line, and that person, right there looking across from you, they want to take you out, and guess what? You want to take them out because one of you is going, in some cases. So, and then you have the thing where you've lost peers, like I said. So it's one of the things where Memorial Day is a true day of reflection, and that's really how it should be looked at. So a little lesson is Happy Memorial Day. Probably not the best thing to say. You can say Happy Veterans Day, right? That's good. You're appreciating your veterans. But Memorial Day is one of those things that, hey, just understand that it's a day of reflection.
Yeah. So if let's say we were passing someone, would a better thing to say be, would it be something like, thank you for your service? Would that be better and more appropriate for the day?
Yeah, absolutely. So something like today on Memorial Day is thank you for your service. If you see somebody who's in the military, thank you for your service. And then, if you really want to get into talking to them, if you talk to them, then just find out their story, talk to them, listen to their story. If you see something that, sometimes people struggle on this day, right? Take the time to talk to them. Take the time to ask them how they're doing, do all those different things. And that's just something that's, it's really important. But yeah, so it's something I taught a class at a high school last year. I told you this earlier. And when I talked to you, I taught that class, nobody knew, nobody in the whole school. There was a teacher in there that, she's 60 years old teacher. And she said, I've never heard that in my whole life, So it's one of those things that is, it's something that we should teach in school.
Right.
So,
and I
great question.
Completely agree. I think that's why, we're having this conversation, partially why we're having this conversation is to enlighten people, because even myself was, guilty of this by saying Happy Memorial Day. And that's not, it's not a happy day. And we definitely don't want to slap our veterans in the face when we say that. So I agree with you.
Well, and it's not that just, understand it. It's one of those things where it's thank you for your service. And, we all, yes, we talk about our loss, we talk about memorialize, but we also want to celebrate our fellow men and women, that really all fought courageously, and some of them have lost their lives. We all knew what we were getting into. And so it's one of those things where it's, you want to think about them, but you also want to celebrate their lives and celebrate the things that they did, and really, really by memory, or thinking about, what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, this is a day that we observe loss, and for the people that have laid, their lives down for us and for our freedom, and, for all of the privileges that we have here. So tell us a little bit about your friendships that you built while you were in service, and how some of those losses really affected you and led up to what you're doing today.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell a story here in just a moment. But I want to start with the squadron that I was in, because I know there's some of my squadron mates watching. HMM 365 was a special squadron. And I know a lot of people have, things that they're talking about, a lot of people are very proud of their units that they've been in. But 365 was extremely, I don't even know the word. I was grateful to be there. Everybody that was a part of that squadron was incredible, So it's just something that we all had great people in that squadron. We all got along so well. So it was really awesome. So I'll talk about a little bit about what happened on July 9th, 2001. And this was a night that really kind of changed everything for me, to the point of it changed everything for me for today. And so let me tell you a little bit about that. So this particular night, we were supposed to go out and do some practice shipboard operations. So anytime that you went out on the ship, you always had to go out and be qualified before you went out on the ship. And so part of that was doing our training. If you are somebody who had already been there and qualified, you had to be current on landing on the ship, and then you had to train other people. So this particular night, I was going out in one of the two aircraft. That's called a section. And in that section, my aircraft, we had 5 people on board. The other aircraft had 5 people on board as well. So one of the things that happened this particular night is that let me back up a little bit. There was a guy in the squadron, and I want to just talk about him real quick, and I'm going to tell his story a little bit. But his name was Sergeant Clark Beatty. And when you go into a squadron, when you check into a squadron, you have to wear your dress uniform. And when you put on the dress uniform, you go, like for me as an officer, I go to the XO. As enlisted, you go to the sergeant major in the Marine Corps. So I got out of my car this particular day, and when I walked in to the squadron, I got out of my car. There was a corporal getting out of his car, and it was Clark Beatty. And so we, walk in together. I'm wearing my uniform. He's wearing his uniform. I go to see the XO. He goes to see the sergeant major. When we walked out of that, the offices, we were assigned to each other. He was my combat crew chief. So I did the majority of my flights with Clark Beatty. Not all, but the majority of my flights with him. So this particular night, I thought I was going to be flying with him, but I walked into what's called maintenance control, and that's where I sign. Like I get the keys for the aircraft. I signed for the aircraft, and Clark was standing right there, and he was signing off on another aircraft, signing it off safe for flight. And I looked at him, and I was like, bro, why aren't we flying together? And he's like, well, I'm not flying with you tonight, but I'll be flying with you tomorrow night. Tonight, I'm going to let this new guy fly with you. A guy named Mark Salah, Sergeant Salah, I love him. Just a great guy. So he said, but we'll be flying together tomorrow night. I remember that conversation just like it's me and you talking, standing in there talking to him. So wasn't flying with me that night, but we're flying together the next night. So we go and we take off, and when we take off, I take off with my aircraft and my crew. And then he takes off, and they take off a little bit behind us. So we get down to what we call it the LHA deck. It's a practice shipboard landing deck. It's a concrete pad that's on the side of the New River there. And so when we end up flying, and inside of my aircraft, we're having a problem. And so we do what's called working, we're flying, we're doing what's called racetrack patterns. We're working 180 degrees out from each other. And we're working 180 degrees out from each other. Like I'm landing, the other aircraft is what's on called downwind. And then when I take off, they're coming into land, and then I'm on downwind. Well, we had an aircraft issue in our aircraft, so we moved up to the front of the LHA deck, and we're sitting there, and we're inside of the aircraft talking. Now, Don Collins, who's on here, I asked him, I said, hey, Gunny, I said, and Mark's Law, so the crew chief, and that just gave me chills, man, that both these guys are on here tonight, because they were my crew that night. And and I'm just going to talk, I'm going to say it real like it happened that night, right? I remember saying, Gunny saying, hey, sir, they're on downwind. I'm like, okay. And so we keep talking. And so Mark is trying to talk to the guy he's training in the back, and I'm trying to talk to the pilot that I'm training in the front, because we had an aircraft issue, and we're trying to teach them. We're trying to instruct. And I remember saying, to Gunny, I was like, hey, Gunny, can I lift? And he goes, sir, did they call departing? And I was like, no. And Mark, who just got to the squadron, his words were like, what the fuck you mean, Gunny? Aircraft just don't disappear. And he stuck his head out the window, and he said, sir, did they call departing? Or he said, sir, there are rocks in this water. This is how I remember it. He said, sir, there are rocks in this water. And I said, no. And he goes, sir, come up now. They're in the water. And so when we came up, like, I mean, there it was, the helicopter's in the water, and it's sticking up out of the water. And it's like what you see on TV, like a big airline accident. There's just debris in the water everywhere. And we take off and we come up over this, over it. We turn the lights on. We can see them, we can see the helicopters down in the water, but it's sticking up out of the water. And I think we showed the picture earlier. And, it's, you can see a slideshow coming through, and it'll show the picture here in just a minute of the aircraft sticking up out of the water. And then, we fly over it, Shana. And when we get over it, we're in a recovery situation. We're in an on-scene commander situation. Hopefully there's survivors down there. And when we get over top, and we're trying to do everything we can, and we see one head pop up, see two heads pop up. Well, that's great. There's 5 people on board. So we see 2 helmets, and we came over and we dropped one raft out of the helicopter, and it didn't really, they couldn't get to the helicopter or to the raft, and it blows away. And so we keep coming in. And I just remember we're debating inside the helicopter. We're like, hey, what do we do? We're talking about, we're working together. There's real good crew coordination going on. And we see one person's kind of just standing there in the water, right? He's just not even moving. And we basically pull into a hover again, and we drop a raft to him. Now, in the time frame, we talked about, do I pull into a hover? And do we, we talked about pulling into a hover, letting them jump in the water. Not a good idea, because what if we end up in the water right next to them?
Right.
So we dropped the raft, and then when we dropped the raft, we just noticed 2 people standing right by the raft, and they're not moving. But we're not seeing any other people moving around. We're not seeing, there's 5 helmets, right? There should be 5 people. There's not 5 people moving around. And so we ended up going back to the LHA deck, and we landed at the LHA deck, and Gunny went into the water, went down in there, and when he got down there was 2 survivors, and he picked up basically got the 2 survivors, and he put them into the raft and started pulling them back to shore. We were calling for the rescue helicopter at the time, or it was called Pedro at the time. And Pedro was off doing another call, and then Pedro finally got to the scene. And I can remember this like it was yesterday, Mark was standing out on what's called his long cord, and the diver went down, and the diver pretty much came straight back up and back into the helicopter. I mean, it was fast. And he came and he landed, and our helicopter was here, and they landed, and we were facing each other, and their crew chief got out, and he walked straight over to Mark. And I'll never forget what came out of Mark's mouth. I mean, when Mark just said, "Sir, take me home. They're all dead. I want to go home." And we knew who had survived at that time. And we knew that the 3 crew chiefs in the back had died. The 2 pilots survived. And, it was, everybody gets back into the helicopter, and then we fly home, and it was not a long flight, but it was silent. I mean, we didn't say a word. And it was hard, because we knew that we had just lost 3 of our peers, and we knew that we had just lost, somebody that I think everybody that's watching would have considered to be one of our best friends, the whole squadron. One of the things that makes Clark different than a lot of other people that I know that have passed away, one of the things that make it so different is that, every July 9th, it starts in the morning and it goes all day. And when I mean it starts in the morning and it goes all day, Shana, we're talking about July 9th of 2001. And we rally every July 9th, 2001. And we talk about Clark, and people go to his grave, people go to his grave and drink beer, at his grave. And so here's somebody who just, we all loved and we all looked up to, and he keeps us together, even 19 coming up on 20 years after he lost his life. So I just remember flying back and I saw, Mark wrote this today on somebody's feed. I mean, when we got out of the helicopter, we had a whole bunch of people there. And I remember walking, up and there's a picture of him there. I remember they took us and we got to go, they took us straight in and somebody's standing right beside you. And they said, "Oh, okay, you can call your wife." And this is what some people don't think about this. It was such a family. Some people don't understand the stress on families and all that is, so I got to call Tisha, my wife. And when I called her, she's like, "Why are you calling me?" Because I never would call in the middle of the night after a flight, She was like, "Why are you calling me?" And I was like, she goes, "I said, I'll be home tomorrow. I just wanted you to know." And she goes, "Why are you going to be home tomorrow? Did something happen?" And I was like, "Yes." And somebody's literally standing a foot from me, because I can't say anything. And she said, "Did something happen, Matt?" And I was like, "Yes." And she said, "Did people get hurt?" And I was like, she said, "Did people get hurt, Matt?" And I couldn't answer because somebody's standing there listening to me. And she said, "Matt, did people die?" And she could tell. I mean, she knew that things had gone wrong. So my wife, people know this, but my wife left. We lived in base housing at the time. And she goes out and she walks the neighborhood and she's counting cars and she's just looking because she has no idea what had happened, what had taken place. So it was rough. It was brutal. I remember getting home to her and I just crawled in the bed when I did. And she just held me and I cried. I mean, there's no other way to put it. It's just a tough night. And, I invite, Don or Mark to call in now if they want to jump on. I don't know if Mark can. I don't know where he's at in the world, but, it's one of those things where after that happened, we went out there. I remember the three of us, we went back to the LHA deck and that picture that popped up a little bit ago of the helicopter in the water, we went back and sat there and we watched them as they were pulling the helicopter out of the water. Yeah, it was brutal. It was one of those things we watched it and we knew that we had just lost three of our peers right there in the water.
Wow. And when you're filled with so much emotion and you're sitting there and you've lost three of your peers, was there a moment where you second guess why you're doing what you're doing, or like what was going through your mind at that time other than shock and disbelief?
I think a lot of people who go through that are either in combat or in there's a thing called survivor's remorse, and where a lot of people that are in combat that lose a peer or in training that lose a peer, you feel guilty. You feel like, why wasn't it me? Why was it them? Why wasn't it our helicopter that had that happen to it? And so you get a little bit of that. You get a little bit of guilt. You get a little bit, it's crushing. I mean, they got us all up flying within a couple of days. My gosh, a couple of weeks later, I was in Puerto Rico and I took off. That same helicopter that I just had the problem is, I took off and lost an engine on takeoff. It rolled back and ended up, doing what's called auto rotation, really kind of down the hill and got to the bottom and we flew it away. But man, I wanted to come back and quit. I was ready to quit. I remember flying back to the ship and I was like, man, I am done. I am so done with this. Cause you just lost, like I said, you lost your friend and you lost, your peers. And then, you're sitting there and, you get close to, I was bracing for impact. I thought that particular night in Puerto Rico that I was getting ready to hit, and then we rolled straight from there. And the next thing you know, 9/11 happens. Remember, this happened July 9th, 2001. And then 9/11 happens and we are, the next thing you know, we're in Afghanistan, And I know the patch is showing right there. There's Sergeant Beatty, Sergeant Lane, and Lance Corporal Hughes. Those were the three people that, didn't make it that night. And Clark Beatty, like I said, was like a brother to all of us, each and every one of us. He was like a best friend to everybody, And so it's hard. Yeah. So yeah, did you feel like, yeah, it was overwhelming, and still to this day is overwhelming. It is.
And I think, as far as his impact on you all, to know that still 20 years later that you still celebrate him, I think that that's really amazing. So is that kind of what you look to do with Convene, is to kind of make such an impact like that on other people's lives?
Yeah. So to finish the story, when we were in the days following the mishap, I was told that, what they ended up doing inside the helicopter, I call it, 12 seconds changed everything, because I speak about this all the time. I speak about it at conferences and all that, because the mishap they believe took about 12 seconds total. And what they did is they turned a red cockpit dome light on. They were flying night vision goggles, and those night vision goggles made the red light made their goggles bloom out. But it doesn't mean that you can't still fly the helicopter. It's a perfectly good helicopter, right? As pilots, we're taught to level the wings, center the ball, and pull power and climb away from the ground. They didn't do that. Everybody focused on that light. And unfortunately, it was a 12-second human error made, and cost three people their lives. We go into the business, the aviation business, and we know the risk. And unfortunately, this particular night, it happened. But one of the things that we found out within a couple of days later is that this mishap had happened in a squadron a year and a half, 2 years prior, where they had a hard landing, where they just came in and had a hard landing. And so they could have turned that switch from a single toggle switch to a dual toggle switch, which would have pretty much made it impossible to turn on that red cockpit dome light. And so if that red cockpit dome light had not have been turned on, and everybody had not have focused on, turning that light off, then, it's one of those things where we wouldn't be sitting here talking about it today. But it is this mishap and losing Clark and, the other Marines, it's such a driving force in my life. It has been since that time that, that's why we do have Convene. And, Convene is a platform where I believe we all have a story. And I believe as we share that story, no matter what walk of life you're in, that we can help each other. And by helping each other, we can help, things like this not happen, especially when you live in a high risk environment, a time critical decision making environment like us. I know that Mark, and I know that Don, and I know, a lot of the others watching would agree. We know what we're signing up to do, but you got to work together as a crew. You got to communicate. You got to, it doesn't matter who you are. You have to just work together. And so that's what I dedicated my life. Sitting there watching them pulling the helicopter out of the water, I dedicated my life to really talking about this and not letting this happen, whether that be in aviation or other things as well. So.
Now let's touch a little bit on your bounce back, that, going through that tragic experience. How did you bounce back from that led up to this moment? Like, what was your process through that remorse and the mourning and the grief?
Yeah, well, the mourning is not over. I'll be honest with you. I went to Israel last year, and when I went to Israel, I planted a tree in Clark's name, and it was hard. It was hard. And it's one of those things that I don't think anybody that was in HMM 365 will ever forget, the loss of this particular night. It really affected us all, what happened this night. And so it's what Memorial Day is about. It's about remembering, right? It's about remembering the loss. But I think that Clark, I honestly, because I know what type of person he was, and I know a lot of people watching knows what type of person he was, he would expect us. He would expect us to do what we're doing. He would expect us to train the people that we flew with after that. He would expect us to work with our crews no matter where we're at. You know, I mean, when I was in air medical flying with a flight nurse and a flight paramedic, every time I talked to a crew, because I was a relief pilot, and I went in and I would walk in and I would say, "Hey, Shana, how you doing? My name is Matt. I'm your pilot, right? And you be the flight nurse, and you never met me before. But all of a sudden, we're supposed to go out and fly together, right?" Well, I would think about that night, and I would think about how I would talk to people and how we would communicate, and I would have to open you up. But it's how he taught his Marines. It's how they, you know, they expected and they counted on each other and all that. And so it really just kind of changed how, you know, I thought, my thought process, how I communicated. And I think, you know, it helped us all in a bad way, you know, losing them, but it helped us, you know, think about how we went forth and did things, if that makes sense.
And coming from that experience, you know, how did that inevitably affect your family? You know, we know that it affected you, but how did that also affect your family and your friends?
Yeah. Well, I know that it still affects my Marine Corps friends from HMN 365 to this day. There's no doubt in my mind that to this day, it's one of those things that we think about all the time, that we talk and we communicate about. With my family, you know, and I took a 5-year hiatus to flying. And when I went back to flying, my wife was like, "Really? You going back to flying? Are you serious?" You know? I went and taught, I got asked, I'm a speaker, right? I got asked to teach a course one time. And when you're a speaker, you don't turn down speaking. If somebody says, "Can you speak?" Guess what you do? You speak. And so somebody asked me, they said, "Hey, Matt, can you talk about PTSD?" And I'm like, "Okay, I'll talk about it. I don't have it, but I'll talk about it." You know, I have a psychology degree and I was working on my master's degree at the time. And I started reading it and I'm like, wait a minute. Literally, I was like, well, this is me. This is me. And so I'm reading it and I'm like, when they told me that I was getting medically retired from the military, I was like, thank God I do not have to fly anymore, because I was overwhelmed with the pressure of this particular night, overwhelmed with going into combat. And some of these people know watching, going to Afghanistan, and just in Afghanistan, taking off and landing. I'm not going to lie, taking off and landing, I could care less about getting shot at. I could care less about going into a hot zone. It was the landing that was the craziest thing you ever did. It's like when I explained to people about landing the helicopter in Afghanistan, the 46, I explained to them, it's like, okay, pull up to your driveway and start going towards your garage, and think about a mist coming down and icing your whole windshield over, but you have to pull into your single car garage and you have to stop before you hit the wall. Because when you are 50 feet in Afghanistan, you were along for the ride, right? And you were on your instruments looking about how you landed, right? And that's how you landed, right? Well, one of the things that happened, we were on a raid over there, and I landed, main mount touched, nose wheel touched, and the nose wheel snapped. And then I thought it was a great idea that I picked the helicopter up from this mission we were on, and I fly it back to Kandahar and land on pallets, right? Now, why I decided if I could do it over, I'd have jumped out and they'd have come in and bombed the aircraft, and I wouldn't have put myself through any kind of stress like that, because we were this close to running out of fuel. I mean, this close. We were almost out. And so we were on the last chance. So the pressure started getting to me, if I'm being honest with you, about flying and all that stuff. And so when they said, "Hey, you're done," I was like, okay, good. I'm done. Thank you. Out, you know, and now I'm back to being a pilot all the time. So I'd like to think that it's a little bit safer. I'm a little bit safer. And, you know, I think about it and I talk about it. Decision making, no matter what that is so important in life. And you and I have had these conversations, right? About, how we make decisions.
Right. I was actually just about to bring that up, because I know, like, I was dealing with some pressure recently, and I want you to talk a little bit more about that. Like, you know, whether you're in the military or, you know, in some sort of service to our country or not, just dealing with the pressures of life. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. And before I do it, if anybody's watching and wants to call, you just call the phone number and they'll put you through. But I'd love to hear from anybody if they want to call in real quick. We only have about 15 minutes left, or ask a question and we can answer it or make a comment. So I believe that we all have a story like I was talking about, and we all come through, we go through decision making. So if you go back to the mishap and you look at what ended up happening in the mishap, some mistakes were obviously made prior to, if they would have just changed that bolt, or if they'd have turned the red cockpit dome light on and they'd have leveled the wings and centered the ball and climbed away from the ground, instead of that human error where everybody focused on the light, right? So I think it's so important that you talk and you share these stories and you talk about these stories. Now, this is an aviation story, right? And we're talking about a mishap and the loss of a friend that impacted all of our lives. But we can be talking about our marriages. We could be talking about our relationships. We can be talking about our job situations. We can be talking about, and it's just so important that we talk and communicate. Now, if you go back to Clark, that's what he believed in. He believed in as a trainer, as a crew chief. He held his people accountable and he communicated and he talked. So learning from him, and learning from that, I just believe, as I would go out and speak, Shana, at conferences and talk about this, and I would talk about this mishap and talk about decision making, people would come up to me afterwards and they would say, "Hey, Matt, I know you're talking about, our job as a pilot or our job as a medical crew." And they would say, "But can I talk to you about something?" And I would say, "Yep, sure." And they would say, "Can I talk to you about my marriage? Can I talk to you about my relationship?" And so conceptually, it's decision making is decision making. We all learn from our mistakes. We all learn from others' mistakes. So you and I, the other day, when we were sitting there talking about jobs and we're talking about life and we're talking about all the things that we're talking about, we're talking through our life experience, right? And that's just how we can share and how we can talk. And, so out of, and I really mean this, out of the loss of Clark, that's why Convene is here. That's what Convene Communities is all about. It really is. If it was a book, and there was a forward in the book and it said this is dedicated to, yes, it would be dedicated to him, because he really, and this whole thing really makes me think about who I am, how I make decisions, how I talk to people, how I communicate with people. It's all because of him. It's all because of this one night.
Right. Now tell us a little bit about the birth process of Convene Communities, because now you've been doing it for, is it 10 years or 12 years?
So it's 10 years. I've been at this for 10 years. I've built this, and it was when I sat there and I talked about this and what I do and what I speak about, and I was sitting at a table in a restaurant, and I told somebody that, about what this is and what I'm doing and how we're, I was telling this story. I literally sat at the table and told this particular story. And I said to them, I said, you know what? A lot of times in military aviation, we get, or even in the military, we get out of the helicopter and we say, "Okay, Shana, what just happened in that helicopter stays in that helicopter. We're not going to talk about it. We're not going to share the story. We're not going to talk about the stupid things we just did." That's the wrong answer. That is the wrong answer. That's what happened in this case. That other squadron did not share what had happened to them a year and a half prior or 2 years prior. If they would have shared that information, this mishap would not have happened. It wouldn't have happened.
Right.
If it was a dual toggle switch inside that helicopter, a different bolt inside that helicopter, you wouldn't have turned the red cockpit dome light on, right? It's just it, or they maybe, if that story had been talked about this red cockpit dome light, non-MVG compatible lights, maybe they would have known. And so when that light came on, they would have focused on flying the aircraft. Instead, they didn't focus on flying the aircraft, and the aircraft flew straight into the water. So it's these stories about, no matter what you're in a time-critical environment, or marriage, or family, or relationship, I don't care. It doesn't matter. Parenting, we all sit around. If you and I are sitting around the table, I could say, "Hey, Shana, if you were in this situation, how would you handle it?"
Right.
Hey, caller. Who's calling? You're on the air.
Hey, this is Don Collins.
What's up, brother?
Not much, man. Just hanging in there.
Man, it's good to hear your voice. It's been a while.
It's been a day or two.
Yeah. I know this hits home, man. Add what you got to add. Let me hear it, because, man, I miss you, and I think this night was a night that changed us all, right?
Sure did. All of us all of us on that aircraft. You know, when we seen that Whitewater and Dash 2 went in the drink, it was a tough evening.
Yeah, it was, man. It was, you know, to know that those guys were down there, and
I couldn't do anything about it.
Well, you couldn't. There's nothing. You know, Mark and I have had this conversation. We've actually talked about it a lot, Don, and you know, I don't think, you know, there's nothing any of us could do as much as we wanted to do something.
Yeah, I couldn't get anywhere in the aircraft, even just to feel anything. There was, you know, it was all bundled up and folded up on it, you know, and that was a rough day. Every day that day goes by. My girl and I, we talk about it every now and then, and we just think about baby and Elaine and Hughes, you know. That was a rough day.
Yeah, and so Don went into the water, right? So we landed back on the LHA deck, and he went down the hill, the side of the hill, and went into the water. And so went out to the aircraft, and that was tough.
Yeah, it was. You know, as much as I wanted to bail out of the aircraft there when we dropped the 2 life rafts, there was just good call on our part. You know, water was shallow at the point there, but it was rough.
Yeah. Hi. How? I mean, let's just talk about this, man. How has it affected you? Because I think it's important that we talk about it. You know, I think it's important that we. Obviously, you've heard me say this, man. There's nobody like Clark. We all loved him. It brings us all together. Every single year, it brings us together. So how has it affected you?
It you know, the day we flew back, like I said, that was you said it right as we were flying back. Pedro took over, you know, and it was a calmest flight. You know, it's only a short flight back to the New River there, but it was the longest flight. It was silence in the aircraft. The water was smooth, calm, and when we landed and shut the aircraft down, and we all went to debrief. It was a night. You know, it'll never be forgotten, and neither will anybody else. You know, there was some of the best crew chiefs there in that plane. And, as far as it affected me, you know, I took one day at a time. That was just a rough day. And, you know, we all have losses throughout our life, and every one of them is different. And everyone affects people differently. Just look back at the day that we were all out for training just before deployment, and we all got together and we were all telling our own stories, you know, prior to this, and then have to go out and fly and do some practicing, and then we had that mishap. You know,
it's pretty crazy. And it drives me, Don. You know, the remembering Clark, and like you've heard me talking about it drives me. It drives everything that I do still to this day. Again, I never remember. I remember, you know, getting out of the car, walking in with him. I remember, you know, him trying to beat the hell out of me in the back of the 46 with a pump handle. A full out melee up in, you know, up in the, you know, up in the office up there. I mean, full fight I guess you'd say UFC now, but just a great guy. And we just, man, there was nothing like 365. I'll say that. I've never been in anything
sure.
like it.
The best squadron I ever was at, and it was, you know, and Mark, he taught me, and Howard and Glance, you know, the senior crew chiefs, they taught me everything I knew. We didn't have no problem deploying and doing our missions day in, day out. And we had a few close calls, you know, and yeah, that's what brings brotherhood in Marine Corps. You know, yeah. We'll take care of each other until you know, we'll until our day has come. And,
yeah.
But it's been a long time, and it's good hearing from you. It's good seeing what's going on and what you're doing with the community there.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you jumped on, man. I like I said, I'll never forget that night. I'll never forget that night, and I'll never forget sitting out on the LHA deck with you watching a few days later.
Yeah, that was the longest walk from that LHA deck out to that crash site, and then getting them in the life raft, and then pulling them back. And that was a long, yeah, that was a night.
Yeah. There's a comment here. I don't know, Stezo, if you can see the comment that just came in from Mark Salah. I don't know if you can.
After that accident, there was still nothing but silence. No one talked about it. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, what we're talking about is there was the flight back, Shayna. We had to fly. It was about 7 miles back to that, and I had to make some. The only thing we did was make radio calls, and other than that, there wasn't a word spoken inside. Say it again.
So, what about the days following? Like after?
Well, the days following, and Don, you were there. I mean, the days following. I mean, it was we had their funerals, you know, and it was a lot of uncertainty. I recall. I mean, just we didn't know what happened. We found out pretty quickly what happened because one of the pilots remembered what happened. That's how we had a good idea of what went on. Because he could remember when the other pilot that survived did not remember. I mean, Don went out and had to pick them up. They were pretty beat up. He had to pick them up and put them in the raft, right, and pull them to shore.
Yep, I pulled both of them in the raft there, you know, and they had some few injuries, and that was it. Once I brought them back to the LZ there, and
yeah. It seemed like, and Don attest to this, it seemed like freaking forever before, you know, the fire, you know, crash fire rescue and the other rescue helicopter got there. I mean, it seemed like a freaking year, Shane. I mean, it was like, are these people ever going to get here? You know, and that's what it felt like to me, just like an eternity. Yeah, but like I said, that was brutal. And like to this day, I think about it all the time. I mean, all the time. I think about it daily. There's not a day goes by, Harley, that it's not on right in the front of my brain where I'm not thinking about it. And I don't know how it is for you, Don, but it really just, it drives me. It does.
Yeah, I'm being retired, you know, and I've been going through pictures of overall the years and deployments, and like I said, 365 was the best squadron as far as camaraderie and you know, persons and people and shops. It was, and just everybody was for everybody. It wasn't just one person, you know, you always had family. It didn't make a difference what we did. There was always somebody there to help you or pull you through, whether it was moving, packing your truck, you know, and it was great. You know, and then when that day happened, everything went standstill for weeks after the funeral and finding out what happened and how could we correct it and not ever happen again. And I mean, you took a lot of that at heart to make it, you know, it won't happen again in that nature as far as the events that happened that night.
Yeah, so I found Mark's comment. He said the loss of those men, they all taught us things that made it possible for us to be here talking and watching this now. And that's true. I mean, Clark was, it's a private message, Steve, so that's where it came in.
Copy, yeah, because I didn't see that at all, yeah. And
yeah, so
in the maintenance control that evening to fly, they were tossing me up back and forth which aircraft to go on, and then Mark says, hey, I'm flying in this one. You can join me on this one. And so it could have been either one of us at that time in that aircraft. And that was the thing that really hits me hard, when he could have been flying with you and I would have been in that aircraft.
Yeah.
And that was a thing we were talking about at maintenance control, because I was one of the crew chiefs that, it didn't make a difference what aircraft I went on. And they tossed me around, and Mark said, hey, you can fly with me. I'm here. And it's all right. Let's go, and
you could easily been over there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Man. Well, you never know what would happen if you're over there. Hey, so we're about to wrap up, Don. I want to talk about this, is that, I want to talk about a couple other people real quick while you're on the call. And
sounds good.
That's Dan Cushing.
Oh yeah,
our CO. This man was the most amazing CO that I think you could have ever imagined. Gave it everything for the Marine Corps, and unfortunately, a couple of years back, he committed suicide. Mark Welch, another great guy that was in the squadron. I'll have him listed, but same thing for him. And then Andy Lamont, who was a peer of my peer group, had a mishap in Iraq and died at the beginning of Iraq, and lost his life as well. So that's 3 squadron mates from 365 that we lost, other than this mishap as well. All coming later than when we were in 365. But all men, I think you would agree, and especially, when you're talking about the CO that I think all of us have really looked up to, for that to happen to him, it's really hard.
Yes, it is. That he was a great CO, and it's unfortunate how things happen and after the pass of something else,
Yeah. So yeah, hey, what else you got? Anything else you want to add on to about?
I have to say, hey, all my 365 people that work with me, and I appreciate all of them. And we had a good crew, and I thank you for letting me have some time here and sharing my thoughts.
Now, I'm so glad you came on. I wish Mark could have come on. There's pictures of Andy coming up right now. I'll talk about this picture right here, Bret Hart, in just a moment. Lieutenant Colonel Cushing, just a great man. And then there's Lieutenant Colonel Cushing right there. And with old Jason Davis right there. Yeah, just a good man, just to know what happened to him is just hard,
Yeah.
But man, I appreciate you coming on. I wish Mark could come on, but Mark is serving in places that we can't talk about to this day.
Yeah.
He's over there doing his thing. So I love him, love him. I love you, man. I really appreciate everybody, so. Let's keep in touch.
Yeah, have this time, and we'll keep in touch a little more, I'm sure. And you're welcome to come out here to Oregon anytime.
That's right. I need to, for sure. I see those fish you catch out there. That's what I need to come check out. So.
All right, I'll get off here, and we'll keep in touch.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you for your call.
You too. All right, you all have a good one.
We'll see you. Thank you. That's awesome that he called, he's such a good guy. Like I said, the pain of that night, it was just brutal. I mentioned the other guys earlier. I wanted to mention two other guys. Jay Albin, another great Marine who lost his life in Iraqi freedom right at the beginning of the war. Had a crash, which is, hard. Just such an incredible Marine. And then the other guy, Brett Hart, that was the picture that a minute ago, and where Brett was standing in front of the, shaking somebody's hand there. 32 years in the Marine Corps, and was right before retiring. And there's Jay's tombstone from Arlington. And then the other one is Brett Hart. Brett Hart was 32 years in the Marine Corps, was getting ready to retire. And he ended up committing suicide 3 days before he got out. And there's Brett right there. And or a couple of days before his change of command. And so, my friend Doc is in the background, controlling the phones for this. And he's been part of it a lot longer than I have, but I'm so lucky to be a part of this, is JTF 22-0. We don't want any of our fellow veterans to commit suicide. So I just want to bring that up because, if there's something going on and you're hurting, reach out. JTF 22-0 is an incredible resource. Reach out. Don't hurt, reach out to somebody. And that's so important, and just an incredible thing that we don't want to have to anybody, happen to anybody, I'm going to say one more thing. My man Fish is watching. Fish is one of my friends that I met in Israel. When I went over there, he was part of the IDF over in Israel, and watching all the way from Israel right now, which is pretty cool to me. I think that's really awesome.
Now I know that about ready to wrap it up, but I do want to touch a little bit more on, your slogan, the tagline of Convene, which is real life, real people, and real experiences. And we know we just talked 12 seconds just changed everything for you. So tell us about real life, real people, and real experiences and what that means to you.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that. And that's a great way to wrap this show up. A couple of years ago, when I was creating all this and really learning from, getting my master's degree and going through formulating what Convene is see, it's on my sweatshirt right there, is
one of those.
Yeah. Real life, real people, real experience, right? Real life, real people, real experience. We all have a story, Shayna. We all have a story, and we all have things we go through. I know Doc sitting here in the background. He could be on this show with me talking about the loss of his friends tonight. There's not a doubt in my mind. We've all gone through things, whatever walk of life that we're in, whether that be in the military, whether that be parenting, whether that be your marriage, whether that be your relationship, whether that be jobs. But again, it's like me sitting down with you and saying, Shayna, if you were in this situation, how would you handle it? Right? And so real life. It's real life. Life ain't easy. There's 30 plus million people without a job right now, right? So real life, real people. We're all real people. Life is not a bed of roses, right? It's not. We have ups, we have downs, but it's how you bounce back. And I think one of the things that's so special about HMM 365 is we're at 20 years since this mishap, and we are all tight, right? We are still close, and real experiences. We all have experiences, both good, both bad, experiences that we learn from. And that's what Convene is. How can we come together? You see that. Don calling in right there, right? We're still family, right? So how can we learn from each other? How can we support each other? And no matter what walk of life it is.
And I love that tagline because I think, all of our experiences connect us in some shape, in some form, in some fashion, regardless of if it was a military in a 12-second accident that changed your life, and then something that happened to me in 12 seconds and it changed my life, and how we both experienced something similar through our feelings and through the emotions and through, the downs, and how we had to reset. So I love that tagline because it's so true. We are all real life, experiencing real life, and we're real people. So
exactly. Well, Shana, thank you. And Stezo, thank you so much for being in the background. Doc, thank you. You two are great. I really appreciate both of you. Shana, I really just appreciate you being on and being a part of this. And I was thinking about who could I have come and interview me. I immediately thought of you because I wanted somebody who, was real, you don't know the story. So I wanted somebody that could ask questions and be a part of it. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'm so happy that you're part of this. Don, thanks for calling in. Mark, I wish you could have, brother, but just know I love you. And so that's it. Stezo, if you want to take us out here. Shana, thank you.
Thank you, Matthew.
Everybody have a good night.